The year was 1851. As a merciless sun beat down upon the vast Kansas plains, two figures huddled beneath the meager shade of a solitary cottonwood tree. Charlotte and Emily Parker, sisters from Philadelphia, struggled to conserve their dwindling water supply as they surveyed the empty horizon. 3 days earlier, the wagon train that had been their passage west had disappeared into the distance, leaving them to the unforgiving wilderness. Their crime? A false accusation of theft that masked a more sinister motive. With no provisions, no weapons, and miles from any settlement, their chances of survival diminished with each passing hour. As Emily, the younger sister, succumbed to a feverish sleep, Charlotte gathered what little strength remained and began collecting buffalo chips and damp grass. If no one would come looking for them, perhaps someone might notice their smoke. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. On the far side of the rolling grassland, a solitary rider tracked a herd of buffalo. Swift Arrow, a respected Kiowa scout with keen eyes and a reputation for reading the land like others read books, paused his horse when he spotted an unusual smudge against the brilliant blue sky. Smoke rising in such a pattern was no natural occurrence, nor the campfire of experienced plainsmen. Someone was sending a deliberate signal, someone who needed help. In that moment, with tensions between settlers and native tribes at a breaking point, Swift Arrow faced a choice that would alter the course of 3 lives forever. This is the remarkable story of Charlotte and Emily Parker, and the man who risked everything to rescue 2 strangers from a world entirely different from his own. Charlotte Parker had never imagined that the same prairie she once found beautiful could become so terrifying. 6 weeks earlier, when the wagon train had departed Independence, Missouri, she had marveled at the endless waves of grass shifting in the breeze like a golden-green ocean. Now, on her 3rd day, stranded with her younger sister Emily beneath the lone cottonwood tree, that same grassland stretched around them like an inescapable prison. "Take another sip," Charlotte urged, holding their last canteen to Emily's cracked lips. "Just enough to wet your mouth." At 22, Charlotte had always been the practical one, the sister who planned and prepared. Emily, 4 years younger, possessed a dreamer's heart and an artist's eye. Neither quality served them well in their current predicament. Emily's once vibrant blue eyes now appeared dull with fever, her fair skin reddened by sun, despite Charlotte's efforts to keep her in shade. The scratches on her arms, inflicted during their forcible removal from the wagon train, had grown inflamed, despite Charlotte's attempts to clean them with precious water. "Do you think they'll come back for us?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible above the constant prairie wind. Charlotte busied herself, adjusting the makeshift shade canopy she'd fashioned from her petticoat, rather than answer directly. The truth was too brutal to voice aloud. No, Warren Mitchell would not be returning for them, not after he'd orchestrated their abandonment so meticulously. April 1851 had begun with such promise, when their uncle had died unexpectedly in Philadelphia, leaving them without family or means. The advertisement seeking respectable young women to join wagon train to Oregon Territory had seemed providential. Warren Mitchell, the train's leader, had interviewed them personally, his grey eyes evaluating them with what Charlotte initially mistook for proper caution rather than calculation. 2 educated young women would be an asset to our company, he'd declared. Several families with children require tutoring, and my own wife would welcome feminine companionship. The arrangement had seemed perfect. Passage west in exchange for their skills, with the promise of teaching positions awaiting in Oregon. Charlotte had sold their few remaining possessions to purchase proper traveling clothes and supplies, while Emily packed her sketching materials to document their great adventure. During the first month, all had progressed as promised. The sisters shared a wagon with the Williamson family. Charlotte taught the train's 12 children for 2 hours each afternoon, and Emily's gentle nature made her a favorite among the younger children. Even Mrs. Mitchell, a stern woman with perpetually pursed lips, seemed to warm to them gradually. Everything changed when they crossed into Kansas territory. Warren Mitchell began visiting their campfire in the evenings, ostensibly to discuss the children's progress. His gaze lingered too long on Emily, his hands finding reasons to brush against hers when passing a plate or cup. Charlotte noticed, though Emily, with her trusting nature, saw nothing amiss. "Mr. Mitchell was asking about your sketches today," Emily mentioned one evening as they prepared for sleep. "He seemed particularly interested in the ones of the river crossings and landmarks we've passed." A chill had run through Charlotte, despite the warm spring night. The sketches were remarkably detailed. Emily had always possessed a nearly perfect visual memory and the ability to recreate landscapes with uncanny accuracy. Such drawings would be invaluable to someone planning routes through relatively unmapped territory. The next morning, Charlotte awoke to find Emily's portfolio missing from their trunk. Before she could begin searching, Warren Mitchell's voice boomed through the camp. "Thief! We have a thief among us!" The entire company gathered as Mitchell produced a gold pocket watch from Emily's belongings. Charlotte recognized it immediately as Mitchell's prized possession, one he consulted ostentatiously throughout each day. "I never took that," Emily protested, her face draining of color. "I would never steal anything." "The evidence suggests otherwise." "Miss Parker," Mitchell replied, his voice carrying the righteousness of a frontier preacher, "this watch was a gift from my father. Its value is beyond price to me." Charlotte stepped forward. "This is absurd. My sister is no thief. Someone has planted this in our belongings." Mrs. Mitchell's voice cut through the murmurs of the gathered settlers. "Perhaps we should also mention the confidential maps that were found in their trunk as well. Maps showing water sources and passages that only my husband and our guide have knowledge of." The accusation struck with calculated precision. In the dangerous journey west, nothing threatened a wagon train more than the prospect of someone sharing their planned route with potentially hostile parties. Though unspoken, the implication hung in the air. The Parker sisters might be informants for bandits or native tribes. "We took nothing," Charlotte insisted, even as she noted the hardening expressions around them. Settlers who had been friendly just days before now looked at them with suspicion and fear. "Someone has placed these items among our things." "And why would anyone do such a thing?" Mitchell asked, spreading his hands in a show of reasonableness. "What purpose would that serve?" Charlotte's eyes met his, and in that moment she understood. The missing sketches, the apparently stolen watch and maps, all were merely pretexts. Warren Mitchell wanted Emily, had likely been planning how to separate her from the wagon train and from Charlotte's protection. When Emily had failed to respond to his attention, he had devised this shameful alternative. The train's council, 5 men, including Mitchell himself, deliberated for less than an hour. The verdict was swift and harsh. The Parker sisters would be left behind. Their crime was too serious for them to continue with the company. "You can't simply abandon 2 women on the open prairie." Mrs. Williamson had protested, one of the few voices raised in their defense. "It's a death sentence." "They'll have water and basic provisions," Mitchell countered smoothly. "Enough to sustain them until they can make their way back to the last trading post we passed. It's more mercy than many would show to those who betray their trust." The provisions proved to be a cruel joke: a single canteen of water, a small pouch of cornmeal, and a flint for fire starting. No weapons, no tools, nothing that would truly aid survival. The trading post Mitchell mentioned was over 50 miles back along their trail. They were driven from camp at gunpoint before dawn, pushed roughly into the tall grass when Emily tried to retrieve her sketchbook. By sunrise, the wagon train had disappeared over the western horizon, leaving them alone in the vast, rolling sea of grass. Now, 3 days later, Charlotte surveyed their desperate situation with cold clarity. The cornmeal was gone. The water is nearly so. Emily's fever had risen steadily since yesterday, her breathing becoming increasingly labored. Charlotte had fashioned a sort of sundial with sticks to track the passing hours, watching with growing dread as the shadow moved inexorably across their small sanctuary. "Charlotte?" Emily's voice pulled her from her dark thoughts. "I had the strangest dream about Father. He was in his study, mapping stars like he used to, but instead of stars, he was charting smoke signals." Charlotte frowned, touching her sister's forehead. "The fever was worse. You should rest," she urged. "No," Emily insisted with surprising strength. "It wasn't just a fever dream. Father showed us in his books how the native peoples communicate across distances, with smoke." Emily had explained between bouts of fevered sleep. Not steady smoke, patterns, bursts, that's what makes it a signal rather than just a campfire. Using a blanket, Charlotte fanned the flames until they caught, then carefully laid a damp cloth strip across the fire. A thick plume of white smoke rose into the cloudless blue sky. She counted slowly to 20, then removed the cloth, allowing the smoke to thin. Again and again, she repeated the process, creating a pulsing pattern that she prayed would be visible for miles across the flat landscape. As the afternoon wore on, Charlotte maintained her signal, though her arms ached and her vision swam from the heat and exertion. Emily slipped in and out of consciousness, her breathing growing more labored. If help didn't come soon, Charlotte refused to complete the thought, focusing instead on the mechanical process of signaling. "Cover the fire! Count! Uncover! Count!" Her world narrowed to this single task, their last, desperate attempt at survival. The sun had begun its descent toward the western horizon when Charlotte, adding another strip of cloth to the fire, sensed, rather than heard, a change in the ambient sounds of the prairie. The constant rustle of grass in the wind, the occasional call of birds, these were suddenly absent, replaced by a preternatural stillness. Raising her head from her work, Charlotte froze. Less than 50 yards away, mounted on a dappled grey, or sat a man watching her with unreadable eyes. His copper skin, high cheekbones, and straight black hair marked him as native to these lands. The feather tied in his hair, the particular patterns painted on his horse's flanks, and the style of his leather garments specifically identified him as Kiowa, if Charlotte's memory of her father's books served correctly. A bow rested casually across his lap, though no arrow was nocked. His posture conveyed neither immediate threat nor particular welcome, merely assessment. Charlotte slowly rose to her feet, fighting the urge to run to her unconscious sister. Such an action might be misinterpreted as aggression or fear. Instead, she faced the rider squarely, summoning what dignity she could in her smoke-stained, bedraggled state. For a long moment neither moved. The only sound was the soft popping of the signal fire and Emily's labored breathing. Then, with deliberate slowness, the rider urged his horse forward. As he drew closer, Charlotte could see that he was perhaps 30 years of age. His face, bearing the subtle lines of one accustomed to studying distant horizons. A long scar traced from his left temple down to his jaw, puckering slightly at the cheekbone. He stopped his horse a few paces from Charlotte, his gaze moving from her to Emily's still form beneath the tree, then back to the signal fire. When he finally spoke, his words were in heavily accented but understandable English. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You make Kiowa smoke talk," he stated, a question implicit in his tone. Charlotte swallowed, her throat painfully dry. "My sister knew. She remembered from our father's books. We needed help." The rider's expression didn't change. But something flickered in his dark eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps respect. "Many days from any white settlement," he observed. "How did you come to be here, alone?" Charlotte hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Would the truth help or harm their chances with this potentially dangerous stranger? In the end, desperation won out over caution. "Our wagon train left us," she explained simply. "My sister is very ill. We have no food, almost no water. We would be grateful for any assistance you might provide." The rider studied her for another long moment, then dismounted in a fluid motion. He approached Emily with careful steps, kneeling, to examine her without touching. His frown deepened as he noted the infected scratches, the sunburn, the signs of dehydration. "Fever sickness," he said, rising to face Charlotte. "Why do wagon people leave women alone? This is not the way of travelers." Charlotte's composure finally cracked, tears cutting clean trails through the dust on her cheeks. "They accused us of stealing. It wasn't true. The leader, he wanted my sister. When she didn't respond to his advances, he planted evidence and had us cast out." Something hard and cold entered the rider's expression then, not directed at Charlotte, but at the story she told. He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "My name is Swift Arrow," he said, touching his chest. "Kiowa scout. I take you to our healer. She helped your sister." Relief flooded through Charlotte so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. "I'm Charlotte Parker. My sister is Emily. Thank you. Thank you." Swift Arrow moved with decisive efficiency. First, he retrieved a water skin from his horse and helped Charlotte give Emily small sips. Then he gathered their few remaining possessions while Charlotte extinguished the signal fire. With gentle care that belied his stern demeanor, he lifted Emily onto his horse, showing Charlotte how to sit behind to support her sister's limp form. "My camp close," he explained, taking the horse's reins to lead them on foot. 1 hour walk. Have medicines there. Tomorrow we go to my people's summer camp." As they left the shelter of the cottonwood tree that had been their sanctuary and prison for 3 desperate days, Charlotte felt a complex swirl of emotions. Relief mingled with fear, hope tempered by uncertainty. The man leading them represented salvation, yet came from a world entirely foreign to her experience, one depicted in Eastern newspapers as dangerous and savage. Looking down at Emily's fevered face, Charlotte knew they had no choice but to trust. This stranger, Swift Arrow, had responded to their signal when their own kind had abandoned them to die. Whatever uncertainties lay ahead, they could scarcely be worse than the fate they had narrowly escaped. The Kansas sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie as the unlikely trio made their slow way eastward. Behind them, the lone cottonwoods stood sentinel over the ashes of a fire that had, against all odds, bridged 2 worlds in a moment of desperate need. Swift Arrow's pace was steady but measured, his attention constantly scanning the horizon as they traveled. Occasionally he would pause, studying something invisible to Charlotte's untrained eyes, perhaps tracks, perhaps simply the changing patterns of grass in the wind. Each time he stopped, he would check on Emily, offering water or adjusting her, positioned to ensure her comfort. As the day's heat began to dissipate, Charlotte found her voice again. "How did you find us? Were you hunting in this area?" Swift Arrow glanced back at her. "Following buffalo sign. Saw your smoke talk from far. Ridge." He gestured eastward. "Not hunting pattern, not settler fire. Kiowa signal for help, but strange." "Not quite right." Charlotte managed a weak smile. "Emily remembered the pattern from our father's books, but we had to guess at the execution." Swift Arrow nodded, something like respect flickering across his features. "Good guess. Smart to try." After a moment he added, "Dangerous place for women alone. Many threats, not just people. Sun, thirst, prairie fire, snake, wolf. We had little choice, Charlotte replied. The wagon master made sure of that. Swift Arrow's expression hardened. This man, name? Warren Mitchell, Charlotte said, the name bitter on her tongue. Swift Arrow said nothing more, but his jaw tightened perceptibly. They continued in silence for a time, with only the rhythmic creaking of the horse's saddle and Emily's labored breathing to mark their passage. As the sun touched the horizon, casting the prairie in a golden glow, Swift Arrow led them into a shallow depression between two gentle hills. Here, a small stand of trees surrounded a spring-fed pool, creating a natural campsite hidden from distant observation. "My camp," Swift Arrow announced, helping Charlotte dismount before carefully lifting Emily down. He had already prepared a shelter of sorts, a simple lean-to of branches covered with a hide that offered protection from sun and dew. With practiced efficiency, Swift Arrow laid Emily in the shelter's shade, then set about gathering materials. From a pack stashed among the rocks near the spring, Charlotte watched as he mixed powdered herbs with water from the spring, creating a paste that he gently applied to Emily's infected scratches. "Medicine for fever, too," he explained, preparing a second mixture in a wooden cup. "Need to drink." Together they managed to rouse Emily enough to swallow some of the bitter liquid. She grimaced at the taste but didn't resist, perhaps too weak to protest. When the task was complete, Swift Arrow turned his attention to making a small, nearly smokeless fire and preparing a simple meal of dried meat reconstituted in a broth, with wild onions and prairie herbs. Charlotte accepted the wooden bowl he offered her, the rich aroma making her suddenly aware of her overwhelming hunger. The meat was unfamiliar. Buffalo, she guessed, but at that moment it seemed the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. As night settled fully over the prairie, bringing with it a blanket of stars so brilliant they seemed close enough to touch, Charlotte found herself studying their rescuer in the firelight. Swift Arrow moved with the quiet confidence of a man completely at ease in his environment, his actions economical yet graceful. The scar that marked his face caught the flickering light, emphasizing the strong planes of his features. "You speak English well," she observed, when the silence stretched too long for comfort. Swift Arrow nodded once. "Learned at mission school, 3 winters there, then with traders, useful to understand white man's words." "And you scout for your people? What does that involve?" "Watch borders, track game, note changes, weather, water, other tribes, settlers." His dark eyes met hers. Across the fire. "Keep people safe." The simple statement carried weight beyond its words. Charlotte understood that by helping them, Swift Arrow had potentially compromised that very duty. 2 white women in a Kiowa camp could bring unwanted attention, complications, even danger. "Why did you help us?" she asked softly. "You could have simply ridden away when you saw my signal." Swift Arrow was silent for so long that Charlotte thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a depth of conviction that transcended the language barrier between them. "Kiowa. Way teaches honor above fear. A warrior who ignores suffering loses medicine, loses connection to the Creator's strength." He gestured toward Emily's sleeping form. "Your sister is innocent of wrong, yet punished. You protect her with courage. This deserves respect." His straightforward explanation, delivered without dramatics or expectation of gratitude, moved Charlotte deeply. In Philadelphia, and even among the wagon train company, help always came with conditions, expectations, social obligations. Swift Arrow's assistance seemed to stem from a much purer ethical code, one that valued action over sentiment, character over circumstance. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing the words were inadequate but having nothing else to offer. Swift Arrow acknowledged her gratitude with a slight nod, then changed the subject. "Tomorrow, ride to summer camp. 2 days' journey. Medicine woman there, white sage, has stronger remedies for your sister." "Will your people welcome us?" Charlotte asked, voicing the fear that had lurked beneath her relief since their rescue. "Some, yes. Some, no." His honesty was unflinching. "Chief Grey Horse, wise man. He will listen before deciding. Tell the truth when asked. Hide nothing." The advice was clear. Their best hope lay in complete honesty about their circumstances. Any attempt at deception would likely be detected and would certainly damage whatever chance they had of receiving continued help. As the fire burned down to embers, Swift Arrow showed Charlotte how to add specific branches that would burn slowly, through the night, providing warmth without requiring constant attention. He then withdrew to the opposite side of the camp, spreading his blanket at a respectful distance that nevertheless allowed him to maintain watch over their safety. Settling beside Emily in the shelter, Charlotte felt the accumulated exhaustion of the past days crash over her in a wave. Her sister's breathing seemed easier already, the herbal remedies apparently having some effect on her fever. For the first time since their abandonment, Charlotte allowed herself to consider the possibility that they might actually survive. As sleep claimed her, her last conscious thought was of the strange turns of fate that had brought them to this moment. Abandoned by those who should have protected them, saved by one whom society had taught them to fear. The irony was not lost on her, even as consciousness slipped away beneath the vast prairie sky. Swift Arrow's people had established their summer camp in a hidden valley where two rivers converged, creating fertile ground for wild plants and natural protection from both the elements and unwanted eyes. As they approached on the second day of travel, Charlotte could see dozens of teepees arranged in a great circle, smoke rising from cooking fires as figures moved about in the golden afternoon light. Emily, though still weak, had regained consciousness. The herbal remedies Swift Arrow administered regularly had reduced her fever enough that she could sit upright on the horse, supported by Charlotte riding behind her. "So many," Emily whispered, taking in the sight of the Kiowa encampment. "I never imagined." Swift Arrow, walking beside them as he had throughout their journey, glanced up. Nearly 40 families. Small gathering compared to autumn buffalo hunt. The scout had grown more communicative during their 2-day journey, explaining aspects of Kiowa life as they traveled. Charlotte had learned that this band was led by Chief Grey Horse, respected for both his wisdom in council and his earlier prowess in battle. The summer camp would remain in this location for another moon cycle before moving to follow the buffalo herds. As they drew closer to the camp, Charlotte noticed activity intensifying. Their approach had been spotted, and several mounted warriors rode out to meet them. Swift Arrow raised his hand in greeting, speaking rapidly in Kiowa. Charlotte couldn't understand the words, but the tone suggested he was explaining their presence. The warriors studied the Parker sisters with expressions ranging from curiosity to open suspicion. One man, with elaborate paint marks on his chest, spoke sharply, gesturing toward the camp and then back at the sisters. Swift Arrow's response was measured but firm, his posture straightening as he spoke. "What are they saying?" Charlotte asked when there was a pause in the conversation. "Running Elk questions why I bring white women to camp," Swift Arrow explained. Quietly, "Says settlers bring only trouble. I tell him you were abandoned, that you need White Sage's medicine." Another exchange followed, more heated than the first. Swift Arrow's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "He says the Mitchell wagon train passed the trading post 3 days ago. Man there said 2 women thieves were left behind for justice." Swift Arrow's dark eyes met Charlotte's. "I tell him Mitchell speaks with snake tongue." Charlotte's heart sank. Warren Mitchell had been thorough in covering his actions, spreading his version of events to ensure that even if the sisters survived, their reputation would precede them. The debate continued for several minutes before an older warrior approached from the camp. His horse was adorned with symbols of authority, and the other men fell silent as he drew near. "Chief Grey Horse," Swift Arrow explained in a whisper before stepping forward to greet the chief with evident respect. Grey Horse was perhaps 60, his face deeply lined by sun and experience, black hair streaked with silver pulled back in two, braids wrapped with otter fur. He wore a fringed buckskin shirt decorated with porcupine quill work and carried himself with quiet dignity. The chief listened to Swift Arrow's explanation without interruption, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. When the scout finished speaking, Grey Horse turned his attention to Charlotte and Emily, studying them with penetrating eyes that seemed to look beyond their physical appearance to something deeper. "You claim you were wronged," he said, in surprisingly clear English. "Left to die for refusing a man's advances." Charlotte straightened despite her exhaustion. "Yes, everything Swift Arrow has told you is true. We pose no threat to your people. We only ask for help until my sister is well enough to travel." Grey Horse considered this. "And then? Where would you go?" "Your wagon train continues west. The nearest white settlement is many days' ride." The question struck Charlotte with its practicality. In her focus on immediate survival, she had given little thought to their longer-term future. The wagon train had been their only planned passage west, their teaching positions in Oregon, their hope for a new life. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we won't burden your people beyond what's necessary." Grey Horse nodded once, as if her honesty satisfied something important. "You will stay with White Sage while the council considers. Swift Arrow will speak for you, as is his right as the one who found you." He turned to the scout. "You vouch for these women with your honor?" "I do," Swift Arrow replied without hesitation. "So be it." The chief wheeled his horse and led the procession into camp. As they passed between the first teepees, Charlotte felt the weight of dozens of stares. Women paused in their work, children gathered to watch with undisguised curiosity, men observed from deliberate distances. She kept her chin up, one arm supporting Emily, trying to project a dignity she scarcely felt in her bedraggled state. Swift Arrow led them to a teepee slightly larger than most, decorated with painted symbols that Charlotte guessed related to healing. An elderly woman emerged as they approached, her silver hair hanging in two long braids, her eyes sharp despite her advanced years. "White Sage," Swift Arrow said with evident respect. "These women need your skills." The healer's gaze swept over Emily, assessing her condition with professional detachment. Without speaking, she gestured for them to bring the younger sister inside the teepee. The interior was cool and dim, smelling of dried herbs and smoke from a small central fire. Various pouches, bundles, and implements hung from the teepee poles, organized in some system Charlotte couldn't decipher. White Sage directed them to lay Emily on a bed of soft furs, then immediately began examining her, muttering under her breath in Kiowa. "She asks what medicines I gave," Swift Arrow translated, "and how long the fever has lasted." Charlotte provided what information she could, watching as White Sage nodded and began selecting herbs from various pouches. The old woman worked with methodical efficiency, grinding some plants to powder, steeping others in water heated over the fire. "White Sage says your sister fights two sicknesses," Swift Arrow explained. "Sun fever and wound poison need different medicines." For the next hour, Charlotte assisted as directed, helping to apply poultices to Emily's infected scratches and supporting her sister's head as White Sage administered various herbal drinks. Throughout the process, the healer's manner remained businesslike but not unkind. When she finally sat back on her heels, she spoke at length to Swift Arrow. "She says Emily must rest now. Medicine will work through the night. You too need rest and food." He hesitated, then added, "White Sage says you may stay in her teepee until the council decides. She will watch over both of you." Relief washed through. Charlotte, please thank her for us, for everything." After translating her gratitude, Swift Arrow prepared to leave. "Council meets tonight. I will speak your truth. Rest now. Regain strength." As the teepee flap closed behind him, Charlotte found herself alone with her sleeping sister and the enigmatic healer. White Sage gestured to another bed of furs, clearly indicating that Charlotte should rest. Only then did she realize how profoundly exhausted she was. Every muscle ached from the days of travel, her skin felt tight from sun exposure, and her mind was foggy with fatigue. As she settled onto the surprisingly comfortable furs, White Sage brought her a cup of something warm that smelled of mint and other herbs Charlotte couldn't identify. The old woman pantomimed drinking and then sleeping. "Thank you," Charlotte said again, accepting the cup and drinking its contents. The liquid was bitter but not unpleasant, warming her from within. White Sage nodded once, then returned to her position near Emily, checking the poultices and murmuring soft words that might have been prayers for healing chants. As the medicine took effect, Charlotte found her thoughts drifting. The events of the past week seemed simultaneously distant and immediate, the false accusations, the abandonment, the desperate days beneath the cottonwood tree, and finally, Swift Arrow's appearance. Like something from a dream, now they were in the heart of a Kiowa camp, dependent on the decisions of a council of strangers. Yet strangely, Charlotte felt safer than she had since leaving Philadelphia. Swift Arrow had proven honorable beyond any expectation, and White Sage's competence inspired confidence. Whatever the council decided, at least Emily was receiving care that might save her life. As consciousness began to slip away, Charlotte's last thought was of Swift Arrow standing before his chief, speaking on their behalf. What had driven him to risk his standing among his people for two unknown women from a world that had shown his people little kindness? The question followed her into dreams filled with signal fires and prairie skies. Outside White Sage's teepee, night settled over the Kiowa camp. A council fire burned at the center of the great circle of dwellings, its flames illuminating the faces of the men gathered to decide the fate of the two sisters who had arrived so unexpectedly in their midst. Swift Arrow stood before the elders, preparing to tell a story that bridged two worlds, a story of abandonment, courage, and a smoke signal that had called him across the divide between peoples long taught to fear one another. Dawn broke over the Kiowa camp in a symphony of colors, painting the eastern sky in bands of gold and crimson. Charlotte woke to these unfamiliar hues, filtering through the smoke hole of White Sage's teepee. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't place herself. The buffalo hide beneath her, the smell of herbs and smoke, the soft murmur of a language she didn't understand. Then, memory returned in a rush. Emily, the abandonment, Swift Arrow, the Kiowa camp. Charlotte sat up quickly, her gaze immediately seeking her sister. Relief flooded through her at the sight of Emily sitting propped against a backrest of woven willow, sipping from a wooden cup while White Sage adjusted the poultice on her arm. The younger Parker sister looked pale but alert, her eyes clear. Of the fever haze that had clouded them for days. "Emily!" Charlotte scrambled to her sister's side, clasping her free hand. "You're awake!" Emily managed a weak smile. "Thanks to our hosts," she said, her voice thin but steady. "White Sage's medicines work wonders. The fever broke sometime during the night." The elderly healer nodded as if understanding the sentiment, if not the specific words. She spoke briefly, gesturing toward Emily's arm, where the angry redness had noticeably receded from the scratches. "She says I'm healing well but need rest," Emily translated, surprising Charlotte. "I've been awake for hours. White Sage has been teaching me Kiowa words for body parts and medicines." Charlotte marveled at her sister's resilience and her typical enthusiasm for learning even in extraordinary circumstances. Emily had always possessed a gift for languages that matched her artistic talents. White Sage rose with the fluid grace of someone whose body knew its purpose despite its years. She spoke again, this time to Charlotte, gesturing toward the teepee entrance and making eating motions. "I think she wants us to have breakfast," Emily interpreted. The elderly woman nodded approval at Emily's understanding, then disappeared through the teepee flap, returning moments later with a young girl who carried a wooden tray bearing 2 bowls of what appeared to be a porridge made from wild grains mixed with dried berries, along with pieces of flatbread. As they ate the simple but nourishing meal, Charlotte studied her sister. Though still weak, Emily seemed transformed from the delirious, dying girl of just days before. White Sage's medicines had worked with remarkable speed. "Have you heard anything about the council?" Emily asked between careful bites. "Swift Arrow mentioned they would decide our fate." Charlotte shook her head. "I've been asleep since we arrived." But Swift Arrow was going to speak on our behalf. Before Emily could respond, the teepee flap opened again. Swift Arrow entered, ducking his head beneath the entrance. His expression revealed nothing of the council's decision, but Charlotte noted with anxiety that he carried a bundle wrapped in doeskin. "Swift Arrow," Emily greeted him, her voice warming with genuine pleasure. "Thank you for bringing us to your healer. I owe you my life." The scout acknowledged her gratitude with a slight nod, his gaze taking in her improved condition with evident satisfaction. "White Sage has strong medicine. Good to see you sitting up." He settled cross-legged near them, arranging the bundle carefully beside him. "Council has decided," he announced without preamble. Charlotte felt her chest tighten with apprehension. "And you may stay until the first snow," he said. 4 moons from now. Time for Emily to heal completely, for both to learn enough of our ways to survive the journey to Fort Laramie when traders go before winter. The decision was more generous than Charlotte had dared hope. 4 months would see Emily fully recovered, and would allow them to travel to Fort Laramie with experienced guides, far safer than attempting to reach civilization on their own. "Thank you," she said fervently. "Please convey our gratitude to Chief Greyhorse and the council." Swift Arrow's expression softened slightly. "Was not an easy decision. Some warriors spoke against. Fear you bring trouble from other whites. But Chief Greyhorse believes in old ways. Hospitality to those in need brings good fortune to the people. We won't betray that trust," Charlotte promised. "We'll work, contribute however we can." "Yes," Swift Arrow agreed. "All in camp must contribute. White Sage says Emily has a quick mind for language, good eyes for plants. We'll train as a helper." He turned to Charlotte. "You will work with Bending Willow, Chief's youngest wife. She teaches children, knows some English from mission school. You teach English words, help with gathering, learn Kiowa ways." The arrangements were sensible, playing to both sisters' strengths while integrating them into the camp's daily life. Charlotte felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had a place, however temporary, and a path forward. Swift Arrow gestured to the bundle beside him. "Clothes," he explained, "from the women of my family. Cannot wear white woman's dress in camp. Too difficult for work. Marks you as an outsider." He unwrapped the doeskin to reveal 2 sets of garments. Deerskin dresses adorned with subtle quillwork, soft-soled moccasins, and leggings for cooler weather. Emily reached out to touch the clothing, her artist's eye appreciating the craftsmanship. "These are beautiful," she said softly. "Your family is very generous." Something flickered in Swift Arrow's expression, perhaps pride, perhaps something more complex. "My mother, Yellowbird, made dresses. My sister, Dancing Fawn, added quillwork. They say proper clothing honors both the wearer and the maker." Charlotte recognized the profound gesture behind the gift. These garments represented not just practical assistance, but a kind of conditional acceptance, an invitation to become less foreign within the Kiowa world. "We're honored," she said, meeting Swift Arrow's gaze directly. "Please thank your mother and sister for us." He nodded, then rose to leave. "Rest today, tomorrow begin new learning." At the teepee entrance he paused. "One more thing. Council sends riders to trading post, then to follow wagon trail. We'll watch Mitchell's party, learn their true nature." His dark eyes held a promise of justice, deferred but not abandoned. Truth has a way of finding light. After Swift Arrow's departure, the sisters examined their new clothing more carefully. The dresses were cut differently from anything they had worn before, designed for freedom of movement rather than the constrictive propriety of Eastern fashion. The leather had been worked to buttery softness, the seam secured with sinew thread so fine it was barely visible. "I never imagined I'd wear Indian clothing," Emily mused, holding a dress against herself to check the size. Father would be fascinated. Their father's academic interest in native cultures had been unusual among their Philadelphia acquaintances. While most viewed indigenous peoples as obstacles to progress at best, or savages at worst, Professor Parker had collected books documenting their complex societies, technologies, and belief systems. "He would say we've been granted an extraordinary opportunity," Charlotte agreed, remembering their father's enthusiasm whenever new ethnographic studies arrived from Western territories. "Few white women have lived among the Kiowa and returned to tell of it." Emily's expression grew thoughtful. "Do you think anyone is looking for us? From the wagon train, I mean." Charlotte considered the question carefully. "Warren Mitchell certainly isn't. He believes he's eliminated any threat to his reputation and secured whatever value he saw in your sketches." Her voice hardened at the memory of his calculating betrayal. As for the others, Mrs. Williamson seemed genuinely distressed by our situation, but I doubt she could convince anyone to delay the journey to search for us. "We're truly on our own then," Emily said, not with self-pity, but with clear-eyed assessment. "Not entirely," Charlotte corrected, glancing around White Sage's teepee with its evidence of careful attention to Emily's needs. "We've found unexpected allies." The next morning brought their introduction to the women who would guide their integration into Kiowa life. Bending Willow, Chief Grey Horse's youngest wife, arrived at White Sage's teepee shortly after dawn. Her late 20s, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her English halting but understandable. "You come now," she instructed Charlotte. "Learn women's work. Children lessons later." Charlotte, already dressed in her new Kiowa clothing, followed Bending Willow through the camp. She felt acutely self-conscious as they passed between teepees, aware of the curious stares from women pausing in their morning tasks and children who made little effort to disguise their interest in the white woman in Kiowa dress. Bending Willow led her to an area at the camp's edge where several women were processing hides, scraping, stretching, and smoking the skins in various stages of preparation. The chief's wife introduced Charlotte to the women, speaking rapidly in Kiowa. Their expressions ranged from polite neutrality to thinly veiled suspicion, but all nodded acknowledgement. "You watch first," Bending Willow instructed. "Then try. Hide work is important. Makes everything." She gestured to the teepees, clothing, containers, and numerous other items throughout the camp that originated as animal skins. "Woman who cannot prepare to hide cannot survive on plains." For the next several hours, Charlotte observed the complex process that transformed raw buffalo and deer hides into the soft, durable leather used for Kiowa dwellings and possessions. The work was physically demanding, requiring strength and endurance Charlotte hadn't known she possessed. By midday, her arms ached from the unaccustomed movements of scraping a hide with a bone tool, and her back protested the hours spent bent over her work. Yet there was unexpected satisfaction in the labor, a direct connection between effort and result that her sheltered Philadelphia upbringing had never provided. When she finally produced a small section of properly prepared deer skin, the approving nods from the other women felt like genuine achievement. As they broke for the midday meal, Charlotte caught sight of Emily sitting outside White Sage's teepee, carefully sorting plants under the elderly healer's supervision. Even from a distance, Charlotte could see her sister's complete absorption in the task, the same focus she brought to her sketching. Bending Willow followed Charlotte's gaze. "Your sister has healing hands," she observed. "White Sage rarely takes students. Great honor. Emily has always been quick to learn," Charlotte replied, "especially things that interest her." "And you?" Bending Willow asked, studying Charlotte with shrewd eyes. "What interests a teacher from Philadelphia?" The question caught Charlotte off guard. In truth, she had become a teacher more from practicality than passion. It was one of the few respectable occupations available to educated women without family support. She had never examined her own interests as deeply as she'd encouraged her sister to pursue hers. "I enjoy helping others learn," she said finally, seeing understanding dawn in someone's eyes. Bending Willow nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "Good. Children need a patient teacher. You work with them after a meal." The afternoon brought Charlotte to a shaded area where 8 Kiowa children ranging from about 5 to 12 years of age waited with varying degrees of patience. Bending Willow explained that these were the children of prominent families, selected to learn English as future interpreters and negotiators with white authorities. Charlotte discovered that teaching transcended cultural boundaries. The Kiowa children, like her Philadelphia pupils, possessed a mixture of aptitudes and attitudes, some eager, some reluctant, all responding to genuine interest in their progress. By the session's end, they had mastered basic greetings and counting to 10 in English, while Charlotte had learned the Kiowa equivalents. As the sun began its westward descent, Charlotte found herself oddly fulfilled by the day's activities. The physical labor and teaching challenges had engaged her completely, leaving little time for anxiety about their precarious situation. When Swift Arrow appeared to escort her back to White Sage's teepee, she realized she had passed the entire day without dwelling on Warren Mitchell's betrayal or their uncertain future. "Good day?" he inquired as they walked through the camp. "Tiring but satisfying," she admitted. "Everyone has been, not friendly exactly, but accepting. More than I expected." Swift Arrow considered this. Kiowa judge by actions more than words. Work well, show respect, learn quickly. These things matter. After a moment he added, "Some still watch with suspicion. Natural after many broken promises from white leaders." Charlotte appreciated his candor. "We understand. We'll continue to prove ourselves worthy of the council's decision." When they reached White Sage's dwelling, Charlotte found Emily sitting outside, sketching with charcoal on a piece of hide stretched flat across a frame. Her sister looked up with brightened eyes. "Charlotte, White Sage gave me materials to draw. Her medicinal plants. She wants to create a teaching tool for future healers." Emily turned the hide to display careful renderings of various plants with Kiowa labels carefully copied beneath each image. The project perfectly suited Emily's talents, combining her artistic skill with her growing interest in Kiowa healing practices. Charlotte felt a surge of gratitude toward White Sage for recognizing her sister's abilities so quickly. "That's wonderful," she said, settling beside Emily. "I spent the day learning to prepare hides and teaching English to Kiowa children." Swift Arrow, who had lingered nearby, spoke. "You both learn and teach. Good balance." Something in his tone carried approval beyond the simple words. As evening approached, the rhythms of the Kiowa camp shifted. Cooking fires blazed higher, families gathered for the day's main meal, and the atmosphere grew more communal. Swift Arrow explained that they would dine with his family, an honor that reflected his role as their advocate. He led them to a teepee, Larger than most, its entrance decorated with symbols Charlotte now recognized as representing achievements in both hunting and warfare. Outside, an elderly woman directed two younger women in meal preparation over an open fire. "My mother, Yellow Bird," Swift Arrow introduced. "My sisters, Dancing Fawn and Little Sparrow." Yellow Bird studied the Parker sisters with frank curiosity, her weathered face revealing nothing of her thoughts. After a moment, she spoke to Swift Arrow in Kiowa. "My mother welcomes you to her fire," he translated. "Says new clothes suit you." "Thank you for your generosity," Charlotte replied, hoping Swift Arrow would convey the sincerity behind her words. "The workmanship is beautiful." When he translated, Yellow Bird's expression softened slightly. She gestured for them to sit on woven mats near the fire, then served a meal of buffalo meat, wild roots similar to potatoes, and berries preserved from the previous season. As they ate, Charlotte observed the family dynamics. Though Swift Arrow clearly commanded respect as the family's male leader, Yellow Bird possessed undeniable authority in her domain. His sisters, both in their 20s, showed deference to their brother, but displayed no subservience. The relationship seemed built on mutual respect rather than the rigid hierarchy Charlotte had expected. Conversation flowed freely, Swift Arrow translating enough for the sisters to follow the general topics: camp news, hunting prospects, preparations for upcoming ceremonies. Occasionally, the Kiowa family would include Charlotte and Emily directly, asking about their day or explaining a particular food or custom. As the meal concluded, Little Sparrow, the younger sister, brought out a carefully wrapped bundle. With obvious pride, she presented Emily with a small deerskin pouch containing charcoal sticks and natural pigments. "For plant drawings," Swift Arrow translated his sister's words. "Little Sparrow helps White Sage gather colors from earth and plants." Emily accepted the gift with genuine delight. "This is incredibly thoughtful," she said, examining the varied pigments. "Please tell her these will make my drawings much more accurate and useful." As Swift Arrow conveyed Emily's appreciation, Charlotte noticed the subtle transformation in the family's demeanor. The initial wariness had given way to cautious acceptance, perhaps even the beginnings of friendship. It struck her that this small family gathering represented a microcosm of the larger challenge facing them: earning trust across profound cultural divisions through sincere effort and mutual respect. Later, as Swift Arrow escorted them back to White Sage's teepee beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Charlotte found herself reflecting on the strange turns of fate that had brought them to this moment. Had they remained with the wagon train, they would be continuing west toward an uncertain future defined by Warren Mitchell's influence and constraints. Instead, they had been thrust into an entirely different world, one with its own challenges and prejudices certainly, but also unexpected opportunities for growth. "Swift Arrow," she said as they approached White Sage's dwelling, "why did you argue for us in council? You took a significant risk speaking for two strangers." He was silent for several steps, considering his answer carefully. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of deep conviction. "When I found you making smoke signals, I saw courage, not just survival, but reaching out across great distance. This is the Kiowa way also, to recognize worthy spirit regardless of skin or language." His voice lowered slightly. Too few on either side look beyond differences to see common humanity. The simple wisdom of his statement resonated deeply with Charlotte. In Philadelphia, and even among the supposedly civilized wagon train company, she had encountered precious little of this perspective. How ironic that here, among people her society labeled savage, she should find such profound insight. "We're fortunate you were the one who saw our signal," she said softly. Swift Arrow's expression remained composed, but something flickered in his dark eyes. perhaps satisfaction, perhaps something more complex. Not fortune, he replied. Kiowa believe paths cross when spirits have something to learn from each other. With those words lingering between them, he left the sisters at White Sage's teepee. As Charlotte watched him walk away, his tall figure, soon enveloped by the gathering darkness, she wondered what lessons their intertwined paths might yet reveal. Summer heat gave way to the first hints of autumn as weeks passed in the Kiowa camp. The moon had completed one full cycle since the Parker sisters' arrival, and with each passing day, their presence became less extraordinary to the tribe. Charlotte and Emily still attracted curious glances, particularly from children, but no longer did conversations halt when they approached or activities pause when they joined a work group. For Charlotte, the transition from outsider to qualified acceptance had come through consistent effort and demonstrated competence. Her days had fallen into a rhythm, mornings spent with the women's work groups learning essential skills, afternoons teaching English to Kiowa children, evenings often passed with Bending Willow's family or White Sage, improving her grasp of the Kiowa language. The physical demands had transformed her body. Hands, once soft from indoor teaching, now carried calluses from processing hides and gathering wild plants. Arms that had never lifted anything heavier than a stack of books now easily carried water-filled buffalo bladders from the river or helped erect tippy poles. Her skin had darkened under the prairie sun, and muscles she hadn't known she possessed had emerged through daily labor. Emily's transformation had been even more remarkable. The sickly, feverish girl of 2 months ago had blossomed into White Sage's dedicated apprentice. Her natural affinity for languages had accelerated her Kiowa fluency beyond Charlotte's more methodical progress. Already she could identify dozens of medicinal plants, prepare basic remedies, and assist in treating minor injuries and illnesses that came to White Sage's teepee. On this particular morning, Charlotte knelt beside the river washing wild turnips that she and 3 Kiowa women had spent the morning harvesting. Spotted Fawn, a woman about Charlotte's age who had gradually warmed to her presence, worked nearby, occasionally correcting Charlotte's technique with good-humored gestures. "You scrub too hard," Spotted Fawn said in the mixture of English and Kiowa they used to communicate. "Breaks skin, ruins taste." Charlotte adjusted her approach, noting how the other woman used circular motions rather than straight scrubbing. "Better to learn now than during winter harvest," she replied in her improving Kiowa. Spotted Fawn laughed. "Winter harvest is ice fishing, different washing." Their easy interaction represented weeks of gradual relationship building, beginning with wary observation, progressing to practical instruction, and finally arriving at a cautious friendship. Similar bonds had formed with several other women, particularly those closer to Charlotte's age who shared responsibilities for children and food preparation. As they worked, a commotion near the camp's edge caught Charlotte's attention. Riders were approaching, not the usual returning hunting parties, but what appeared to be Swift Arrow and the Scouts, who had departed nearly 2 weeks earlier on their mission to observe the Mitchell wagon train. Charlotte felt her chest tighten. Though she'd worked hard to build a new life here, Warren Mitchell's shadow still darkened her thoughts. The wagon train leader represented not just personal betrayal, but an existential threat. If he ever learned the sisters had survived and were living among the Kiowa, there was no telling what action he might take. "Scouts return," Spotted Fawn observed, following Charlotte's gaze. "Swift Arrow brings news." Charlotte rose, drying her hands on her deerskin dress. "I should find Emily." Spotted Fawn nodded understanding. "Go. I finished turnips." Charlotte made her way quickly to White Sage's teepee, where she found Emily cataloguing dried plants into small doeskin pouches, carefully labeling each with Kiowa, symbols that marked their uses and proper preparation. "Swift Arrow has returned," Charlotte said without preamble. "He might have news about Mitchell." Emily's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their methodical work. "Whatever news he brings won't change our situation here," she observed with unexpected pragmatism. "We're safe, Charlotte. Mitchell believes we're dead." "I hope so," Charlotte replied, though she couldn't fully embrace her sister's confidence. "Still, we should hear what Swift Arrow discovered." Emily nodded, securing the medicine pouches before rising to join her sister. Together, they walked toward the central council, area where Chief Greyhorse was already greeting the returned scouts. A crowd had gathered, sensing important news. Swift Arrow dismounted with fluid grace, though Charlotte noted signs of fatigue in his posture. The scouts had ridden hard, their horses showing evidence of extended travel. After presenting Chief Greyhorse with a formal report in Kiowa, Swift Arrow noticed the Parker sisters at the gathering's edge. He spoke briefly to the chief, who nodded permission for him to approach them. "You have news?" Charlotte asked as he drew near. Swift Arrow's expression was grave. "Mitchell wagon train reached Fort Laramie 1 moon ago. Continuing journey to Oregon." A muscle tightened in his jaw. "Man speaks as if he rescued innocents from an Indian attack, claims many warriors were killed during brave defense." Charlotte felt anger rise in her throat. "He abandoned us and now presents himself as a hero?" "Common story," Swift Arrow replied, his voice edged with bitterness born from experience. "White leaders build reputation on false tales of Indian savagery." The injustice burned, but Charlotte recognized the pattern from countless newspaper accounts she had read back east. How many similar heroic narratives had been constructed upon equally false foundations? "Is there more?" Emily asked, her perception as usual cutting to the heart of matters. "You seem troubled beyond Mitchell's lies." Swift Arrow glanced toward the chief, then back to the sisters. "Soldiers at fort speak of new policies. More troops are coming to the plains. Peace treaties being reconsidered." His voice lowered. "Bad signs for all tribes, not just Kiowa." The implications hung in the air between them. Increasing military presence on the plains would constrain the Kiowa's traditional movements and hunting grounds. Treaties that had established fragile boundaries between settler territories and tribal lands were apparently being questioned, likely not in the tribe's favor. "I'm sorry," Charlotte said, knowing the words were woefully inadequate. Swift Arrow's gaze met hers directly. "Not your doing," he said, "but it's important you understand. Storm gathers on the horizon." Before further conversation could develop, a messenger approached from the chief's circle. Swift Arrow was needed for a detailed report to the council. With a brief nod to the sisters, he departed, his bearing straightening into formal posture as he rejoined the tribal leaders. "This changes things," Emily said quietly as they walked back toward White Sage's tipi. "If military pressure increases, the tribe may need to move sooner than planned." Charlotte nodded, considering the implications. "And 2 white women traveling with the tribe could complicate matters significantly." The sisters spent the remainder of the day in their usual tasks, but the news weighed on Charlotte's mind. That evening, as she helped prepare the evening meal with Bending Willow's family group, she broached the subject carefully. Swift Arrow mentioned concerns about increased military presence, she said, keeping her tone conversational as she chopped wild onions. "Will this affect the camp's plans?" Bending Willow glanced toward her husband's council teepee, where tribal leaders had been meeting since the scouts' return. "Greyhorse must decide. Maybe move winter camp earlier, further north where soldiers rarely travel." "Would our presence make things more difficult?" Charlotte asked directly. "Emily and I don't wish to bring trouble to people who have shown us such kindness." The chief's wife studied Charlotte thoughtfully. "Council discusses this question now," she admitted. "Some say white sisters should go to Fort Laramie with next trading party. Others say wait until spring as planned." Charlotte appreciated the honest assessment. "What do you think?" "I think," Bending Willow replied carefully, "that timing must be right. Too soon. Sisters not ready for journey, not strong enough in skills. too late. Maybe soldiers find Kiowa camp, ask difficult questions about white women. The pragmatic evaluation aligned with Charlotte's own thoughts. Their survival outside the Kiowa camp depended on skills they were still developing and knowledge of the plains they were still acquiring. Yet their continued presence might eventually endanger their hosts. As darkness fell and families gathered around cooking fires for the evening meal, the council meeting finally concluded. Word spread quickly through the camp. The tribe would remain in place for another moon cycle, then move to winter grounds earlier than originally planned. The location would be further north than in previous years, in more rugged country, less accessible to military patrols. Swift Arrow sought out the Parker sisters after delivering this news. Finding them seated outside White Sage's teepee, he joined them with the easy familiarity that had developed over the weeks. Council decided, "You will remain with us through winter," he informed them. "Too dangerous to send you to Fort Laramie now. Too many questions about where you came from, how you survived." Charlotte felt simultaneous relief and concern. "We're grateful, but worried our presence might bring trouble to the tribe." Swift Arrow's expression softened slightly. "Chief Grey Horse says Kiowa people face trouble with or without Parker sisters. Better to honor commitment than abandon guests from fear." The echo of their own abandonment by the wagon train hung unspoken between them. The contrast between Warren Mitchell's betrayal and the Kiowa Council's decision to honor their promise. Despite increased risk, was stark. "Winter camp is harder living," Swift Arrow continued, his practical nature reasserting itself. "Cold comes early in the northern hills. More skills needed." He glanced between the sisters. "Must learn quickly. Now." "We will," Emily assured him, her quiet determination evident. "White Sage has already begun teaching me winter remedies and preservation methods." Swift Arrow nodded approval, then turned to Charlotte. "You need hunting skills. Women must know how to set rabbit snares, fish through ice when men are on long hunts." Charlotte hadn't anticipated this development. While she had learned many domestic skills, hunting had remained exclusively male territory within the camp structure she'd observed. "You'll teach me?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, start tomorrow." His matter-of-fact tone precluded any discussion. "Need these skills before snow comes." As Swift Arrow departed to convey council decisions to other camp members, Charlotte contemplated this new dimension of her Kiowa education. The prospect of learning hunting techniques both excited and intimidated her. In Philadelphia, the closest she had come to providing meat for a table was selecting cuts at the butcher's shop. "He's right," Emily observed, reading her sister's thoughts, as she often did. "If we're to survive winter, especially in more remote territory, we need every practical skill they're willing to teach us." Charlotte nodded agreement. "I just hope I don't embarrass myself too thoroughly in the process." The following morning dawned clear and cool, the first true hint of autumn crispness sharpening the air. Charlotte met Swift Arrow at the camp's edge as instructed. Dressed in the warm leggings and hunting jacket, Spotted Fawn had helped her prepare. He carried 2 bows, one his own and a smaller one that he handed to Charlotte. "Women's bow," he explained. "Lighter draw weight, easier to handle." Charlotte examined the beautiful weapon, noting the careful construction and subtle decorative elements carved into the wood. "This is too fine for a beginner," she protested. "Belonged to my sister, Dancing Fawn, before she chose a healing path instead of hunting," Swift Arrow explained. "She says better in your hands than hanging in teepee." The gift represented yet another gesture of acceptance that touched Charlotte deeply. "Please thank her for me." Swift Arrow led her away from camp, explaining as they walked the basics of bow handling, proper stance, and safety considerations. Charlotte listened intently, recognizing that these lessons might one day mean the difference between starvation and survival. They reached a small clearing where Swift Arrow had previously arranged targets. animal hides stuffed with grass at various distances. For the next several hours, he patiently demonstrated proper technique, correcting Charlotte's form with brief touches to adjust her elbow or stance. To her surprise, Charlotte discovered a natural aptitude for archery. Though her first attempts flew wide of the targets, by midday she was consistently hitting the closer marks. "Good eye," Swift Arrow commented after a particularly accurate shot. "Strong arms from hide work help draw the bow properly." Charlotte felt a surprising glow of pride at his approval. The physical transformation of her body from genteel teacher to capable survivor had practical benefits she hadn't anticipated. As they paused to eat the simple meal of dried meat and berries Swift Arrow had brought, Charlotte found herself studying her instructor. Over the weeks, she had come to appreciate not just his skills, but his character, the thoughtful intelligence behind his decisions, the careful balance he maintained between Kiowa traditions and practical adaptations to changing circumstances. "May I ask you something personal?" she ventured during a comfortable silence. Swift Arrow raised an eyebrow slightly, but nodded permission. "You speak English well, understand white ways better than most in the camp. Why choose to remain with the tribe rather than live between worlds as some others have done?" The question had been forming in Charlotte's mind for weeks. With his skills and knowledge, Swift Arrow could likely have found a position as an interpreter or scout for the military, gaining wealth and status in the white world. He was silent for several moments, considering his answer carefully, as was his way. Finally, he spoke with careful precision. "Between worlds there is no place to stand," he said. "Man with feet in two canoes drowns when the waters grow rough." He gestured toward the distant mountains. "I learned white man's words to protect my people, not to join those who take our lands." His gaze met hers directly. "You ask because you and Emily must choose soon, return to White World or find a new path." Charlotte hadn't realized her question was so transparent, or that it reflected her own internal conflict. The weeks in the Kiowa camp had changed her in ways that went beyond physical adaptation. Perspectives she had accepted without question her entire life now seemed narrow and often misguided. "I don't know if we'd be accepted in either world now," she admitted. "Too changed for one, too different for the other." Swift Arrow studied her thoughtfully. "Path reveals itself in walking, not in standing still," he said finally. "Today, learn to bow. Tomorrow, perhaps the answer comes clearer." The practical wisdom resonated with Charlotte, rather than agonizing over long-term decisions that depended on too many unknown factors. Better to focus on mastering the skills that would expand their options. They resumed training, moving on from stationary targets to techniques for hunting small game. Swift Arrow demonstrated how to move silently through brush, how to read animal signs, and how to set simple snares for rabbits and ground birds. As the afternoon progressed, Charlotte found herself almost forgetting the circumstances that had brought her to this moment. There was an unexpected joy in the learning, in discovering capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. When she successfully identified rabbit tracks without prompting, Swift Arrow's approving nod sent a ripple of satisfaction through her. That had nothing to do with mere survival. The sun was lowering toward the western horizon when they finally turned back toward camp. Charlotte carried the bow across her shoulders in the manner Swift Arrow had shown her, along with 2 rabbits caught in the snares they had set. "Tomorrow we clean and prepare what you caught," he said as the camp came into view. "Important to know the entire process, not just hunting." "I'd like that," Charlotte replied, realizing she meant it sincerely. Each new skill represented another step toward true self-sufficiency, something she had never experienced in Philadelphia's dependent, specialized society. As they approached the outer tipis, a small figure darted toward them. Emily, her face alight with excitement. "Charlotte Swift Arrow," she called, her Kiowa accent improving daily under White Sage's tutelage. You must come quickly. White Sage has important news." Something in her sister's tone sent a chill of apprehension through Charlotte. "What's happened?" Emily glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Traders came from the south while you were hunting. They bring word of white men asking questions at trading posts about 2 women traveling with Kiowa." Swift Arrow's posture instantly tensed. "Mitchell?" Emily shook her head. "Not him. Someone sent by the territorial governor. Official inquiries about missing women from wagon train reportedly attacked by Indians." The implications cascaded through Charlotte's mind. Warren Mitchell's self-serving lie that the sisters had been victims of an Indian attack rather than his own treachery had apparently reached official channels. What had begun as one man's scheme to eliminate witnesses to his misdeeds had evolved into a potential military matter. "This changes everything," Swift Arrow said, echoing Charlotte's thoughts. "Must speak with the chief immediately." As he strode toward the council teepee, Emily caught Charlotte's arm, her expression troubled. "There's more," she said softly. "White Sage performed a medicine ceremony after hearing the news. She saw soldiers coming before winter's first deep snow." Emily swallowed hard. "She says our presence has become dangerous to the entire tribe." Charlotte felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. The kindness and protection offered by the Kiowa now threatened to bring retribution upon the very people who had saved them. "What should we do?" she asked, the question encompassing all the accumulated complications of their extraordinary situation. Emily's answer was simple but profound, reflecting the wisdom she had absorbed from White Sage. "We must find a third path, neither returning to the white world that betrayed us, nor remaining to endanger those who saved us." As twilight deepened over the camp, the Parker sisters watched council smoke rise from Grey Horse's teepee. Decisions made in the coming hours would shape not just their future, but potentially the survival of the entire band. The path that had begun with a desperate smoke signal had led them to this critical juncture, where their presence had become both a bridge between worlds and a threat to those who had shown them true humanity. The council fire burned long into the night. From White Sage's tippy, Charlotte and Emily could see the occasional silhouettes of speakers rising to address the gathered leaders, gesturing with the emphasis of crucial debate. Swift Arrow had joined the council immediately upon hearing the traders' news, his knowledge of white authorities' methods making his input essential to the discussion. "Whatever they decide, we must accept it," Charlotte said softly as she and Emily prepared for sleep. "We've brought enough trouble to these people." Emily nodded, her expression solemn in the dim light of their small fire. "White Sage believes the spirits guided Swift Arrow to find us for a purpose. She says our paths crossed was meant to be, but not meant to remain joined forever." The old healer's mystic perspective had increasingly influenced Emily's thinking over the weeks. Charlotte had noticed her sister adopting not just Kiowa skills, but elements of their spiritual worldview, finding meaning in natural signs, expressing gratitude to unseen forces for successful plant gathering, even participating in minor ceremonies under White Sage's guidance. "What do you think our purpose might be?" Charlotte asked, genuinely curious about her sister's evolving perspective. Emily considered the question thoughtfully. "Perhaps to carry truth between worlds. We've seen both sides now, the betrayal of our own kind and the compassion of those we were taught to fear." She traced a pattern in the earth beside her sleeping mat. "Maybe we're meant to be witnesses." Before Charlotte could respond, the teepee flap opened. White Sage entered, followed by Swift Arrow. The elderly healer's face revealed nothing of the council's decision, but Swift Arrow's expression was grave. "Council has decided," he said without preamble, settling cross-legged near the sisters. "Too dangerous for you to remain with the tribe through winter. Too dangerous to send you to Fort Laramie, where questions wait." Charlotte felt her chest tighten. "Then what is to become of us?" Swift Arrow exchanged glances with White Sage, who, nodded encouragement. "I will take you to a place between worlds," he continued. "Trading post run by a man named Joseph Blackwood, former mountain man who married a crow woman, lives by its own rules, respects both ways." "How far?" Emily asked. "Practically 6 days' journey north and west, hidden valley near Bighorn Mountains." Swift Arrow's voice softened slightly. "Blackwood trades with many tribes, few white men, keeps secrets well. You stay through winter, decide your next path when spring comes." The plan made practical sense. A trading post operated by someone who straddled cultural boundaries offered a safe haven without endangering the tribe. Yet Charlotte felt an unexpected pang at the prospect of leaving the community that had become, against all odds, a kind of home. "When do we leave?" she asked, already calculating what preparations would be necessary. 3 days, Swift Arrow replied. "Time enough to gather supplies, prepare for the journey." He hesitated briefly before adding, "I return to tribe after reaching Blackwoods. Must help with winter camp move." Of course, Charlotte thought, suppressing a flicker of disappointment. Swift Arrow's responsibilities to his people took precedence over 2 women who had already received extraordinary assistance from the tribe. "We understand," she assured him. "You've done more than enough." White Sage spoke then, her weathered hands gesturing as she addressed Emily directly in Kiowa. Though Charlotte's language skills had improved, she caught only fragments of the elderly healer's rapid speech. "She says I must gather many medicines. Before we depart," Emily translated, "she will teach me final preparations tomorrow, special remedies for winter ailments." Her voice carried pride at the healer's continued investment in her education, despite their imminent departure. After conveying the council's decision and outlining basic preparations, Swift Arrow departed to make his own arrangements for the journey. White Sage remained, her presence comforting as the sisters absorbed this new change to their circumstances. "I feel as though we're being cast adrift again," Charlotte confessed when Swift Arrow had gone. "Just as we've learned to navigate this world." Emily surprised her with a gentle correction. "Not cast adrift. Guided to the next shelter until the storm passes." She touched Charlotte's hand. "We're stronger now, sister. Not the same helpless women who huddled beneath that cottonwood tree." The observation was undeniably true. Their physical capabilities, practical knowledge, and understanding of the plains environment had expanded dramatically under Kiowa tutelage. They were no longer helpless transplants from Eastern civilization, but emerging survivors who had begun to grasp the harsh realities and unexpected beauties of frontier existence. The following 3 days passed in a flurry of activity. White Sage and Emily worked tirelessly to prepare medicinal supplies, the elder healer packing decades of knowledge into final, urgent lessons. Charlotte divided her time between practicing hunting skills with Swift Arrow and working with the women to prepare proper traveling clothes, food supplies, and essential tools. Yellowbird presented each sister with a winter buffalo robe, the extraordinarily warm garments representing hours of skilled labor. Bending Willow organized the camp's children to bid farewell to their English teacher with small handmade gifts. Beaded bracelets, tiny carved animal figures, a carefully fashioned leather pouch for Charlotte's fire-starting kit. These gestures of generosity from people who had initially regarded them with suspicion or outright hostility moved Charlotte deeply. Somewhere during their weeks in camp, they had transitioned from outsiders to something approaching community members. Not fully Kiowa, certainly, but no longer entirely separate. On the evening before their departure, Chief Greyhorse summoned the sisters to his tepee for a formal farewell. They entered with appropriate respect, seating themselves as Bending Willow had taught them, with Swift Arrow present to translate the chief's more complex thoughts. Greyhorse studied them with thoughtful eyes before speaking. "You came to us as strangers thrown away by your own people," he began, Swift Arrow translating his measured words. "You leave as friends who have learned our ways with good hearts." The chief reached for two small objects wrapped in soft hide. "These belong to my daughters, who now live in the spirit world," he continued, presenting one to each sister. "They would be pleased to know they travel with women of courage." Charlotte carefully unwrapped her gift, a beautifully crafted knife with a bone handle and leather sheath. Emily received a medicine pouch decorated with intricate quill work, designed to be worn around the neck. "Protection for difficult journeys," Grey Horse explained. "Blade guards your body, medicine guards your spirit." "We're deeply honored," Charlotte replied. Knowing the gifts represented far more than practical tools, they symbolized a connection that transcended cultural barriers. The chief nodded acknowledgement, then continued with unexpected directness. "Word has reached us that soldiers search for white women reportedly taken by Kiowa." His expression hardened slightly. "Story spreads that we attacked a wagon train, killed men, stole women." Charlotte felt a familiar anger rise at Warren Mitchell's calculated lie. "That's not what happened," she stated firmly. "We'll tell the truth whenever we can." Grey Horse raised a hand in a calming gesture. "The truth walks slowly on crooked paths. Lies ride fast horses." His weathered face revealed decades of experience with this reality. "When the time comes that you must speak to white authorities, remember that your words affect more than your own future." The responsibility implicit in this statement weighed heavily on Charlotte. Their account of abandonment, if believed, might exonerate the Kiowa from false accusations. Yet the same account would expose Warren Mitchell's treachery, potentially provoking a powerful man to eliminate witnesses who threatened his reputation and freedom. "We'll be careful," she promised. "We owe your people a debt we can never fully repay." Grey Horse's expression softened slightly. "No debt between those who recognize shared humanity," he said, echoing a sentiment Charlotte had heard from others. "In the camp, remember what you have seen here when others speak of Kiowa as savages." "We will," Emily assured him, her voice carrying the quiet conviction that had emerged during their time among the tribe. "Your people have taught us what true civilization means." The chief seemed satisfied with this response. After sharing a ceremonial pipe with Swift Arrow, he formally concluded the audience, placing a hand briefly on each sister's head in a gesture of blessing before they departed. Outside, stars blazed across the prairie sky with remarkable clarity, the Milky Way a luminous river of light above the darkened camp. Charlotte paused to absorb the scene. The circle of tipis, the glowing embers of cooking fires, the soft sounds of family conversations drifting through the cool evening air. For all its initial strangeness, this place had become significant to her in ways Philadelphia never had. "I'll miss this," she admitted as they walked back to White Sage's teepee. "The sky, especially. I never really looked at stars before coming west." Emily nodded, understanding. "We've learned to see differently here. Not just stars, but people too." Dawn broke crisp and clear on their departure day. Swift Arrow arrived at White Sage's teepee leading 3 horses, his own dappled grey, and 2 sturdy paints laden with supplies. "You ride today," he informed the sisters. "Long journey ahead. Better to save strength." Charlotte eyed the horses with apprehension. Though she had learned much during their time with the Kiowa, horseback riding had not been among her acquired skills. The animal's size and power remained intimidating to someone raised in city streets and drawing rooms. Swift Arrow read her hesitation accurately. "Paint with white nose is gentle," he assured her. "Follows well, startles seldom. Good horse for beginning rider." With his patient instruction, Charlotte managed to mount without embarrassing herself completely. Emily, who had occasionally assisted White Sage on plant-gathering excursions on horseback, seemed more comfortable with the process. The entire camp gathered to witness their departure. White Sage presented Emily with a final gift, her own medicine bag containing rare herbs and ingredients. Yellowbird embraced each sister with surprising warmth before stepping back to stand beside her daughters. Even children who had initially shied away from the strange white women now called farewells in a mixture of Kiowa and the English phrases Charlotte had taught them. As they rode from camp, Charlotte felt a complex surge of emotions: gratitude for the extraordinary kindness they had received, anxiety about the journey ahead, and an unexpected sadness at leaving what had become, against all odds, a community where they had found acceptance. Swift Arrow led them northward at a steady pace, selecting routes that avoided known settlement paths and military roads. He rode slightly ahead, his posture alert, eyes constantly scanning the horizon for potential threats or game animals. Charlotte gradually adjusted to the rhythm of horseback travel, her initial tension easing as hours passed without mishap. They made camp that evening in a sheltered ravine beside a small spring. Swift Arrow demonstrated efficient methods for establishing a secure campsite with minimal visibility, skills the sisters would need when traveling alone in future. Charlotte noted how he selected a position that offered both natural protection and escape routes, with water access and adequate grazing for the horses. As they sat beside a carefully shielded fire, eating a simple meal of dried meat and corn, cakes prepared by Yellowbird, Emily voiced a question that had lingered unspoken. Will we ever see the tribe again after winter passes? Swift Arrow considered this thoughtfully, his profile strong against the firelight. Future holds many paths, he replied, characteristically philosophical. Kiowa must move farther north. As white settlements spread, Blackwood's trading post stands between worlds. After a moment he added, perhaps summer trading season paths cross again. Charlotte recognized the diplomatic response for what it was. Neither false hope nor definitive farewell. The reality of frontier life made long-term promises impossible, particularly between people whose worlds were increasingly in conflict. For 5 days, they traveled through changing landscapes, from the open prairie to increasingly rugged terrain, as they approached the foothills of the Bighorn Mountains. Swift Arrow supplemented their provisions with fresh game, rabbits snared at night, a young deer taken with remarkable precision on their 3rd day. He included the sisters in each aspect of the hunting process, reinforcing the skills they would need for winter survival. Charlotte found herself watching Swift Arrow with growing admiration as he navigated this challenging journey. His competence in meeting each obstacle, a flooded stream crossing, an unexpected autumn snowstorm on their 4th night, signs of unfamiliar riders that necessitated a careful detour, reflected a lifetime of acquired wisdom about this harsh but beautiful country. Beyond his practical skills, she had come to appreciate his deeper qualities, the thoughtful intelligence behind his decisions, the balanced perspective that acknowledged both culture's strengths and failings, the quiet dignity with which he faced an uncertain future for his people. On their 6th day of travel, they crested a ridge overlooking a hidden valley nestled between protective mountain slopes. A small creek wound through meadows where horses grazed peacefully. Near the valley's center stood several log structures, a substantial main building surrounded by smaller outbuildings and corrals. Smoke rose from the larger structure's stone chimney, curling against the backdrop of pine-covered slopes. "Blackwoods," Swift Arrow announced, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Safe place." As they descended toward the trading post, Charlotte noted the unique character of the settlement. Unlike military outposts with their rigid formations or typical trading establishments with their utilitarian designs, Blackwoods resembled a harmonious blend of frontier practicality and native aesthetics. A traditional medicine wheel had been constructed near the main building, and several smaller structures showed clear indigenous influence in their construction. They were halfway down the slope when the trading post's door opened. A tall figure emerged, a white man with a full beard streaked with gray, dressed in buckskins adorned with crow beadwork. Behind him came a native woman wrapped in a bright trade blanket, her bearing regal despite her advancing years. Swift Arrow raised a hand in greeting, receiving a similar gesture in return. As they approached the final distance, Charlotte could see the man more clearly. Perhaps 60 years old, his weathered face marked by numerous scars and the deep lines of someone who had spent decades in the elements. Despite his rough appearance, his eyes held an alert intelligence and unexpected warmth. "Swift Arrow, you old wolf," the man called in a deep voice roughened by years and perhaps too much whiskey in his younger days. "Wasn't expecting you till first snow." "Circumstances change, Joseph," Swift Arrow replied as they reached the trading post yard. "Friends need winter sanctuary." Joseph Blackwood surveyed the Parker sisters with undisguised curiosity but no apparent judgment. His wife, introduced as Dawn River, studied them with greater reserve, her dark eyes missing nothing of their Kiowa clothing or the way they handled their horses with newly acquired but imperfect skill. After dismounting, Swift Arrow explained their situation in a mixture of English and Crow language that Charlotte couldn't follow completely. Blackwood listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, while Dawn River remained silent, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. When Swift Arrow concluded his explanation, Blackwood turned to the sisters. "So, ladies, seems you've had yourselves quite the adventure," he said, his frontier directness refreshing after weeks of more circumspect Kiowa communication. "Thrown off a wagon train, rescued by Kiowa, and now caught between worlds with the U.S. cavalry, potentially looking for you." He shook his head with a sardonic smile. "Just another season on the frontier." Charlotte appreciated his matter-of-fact approach. "We understand if sheltering us presents complications for your trading business," she said. "We're willing to work in exchange for lodging." Blackwood waved away her concerns. "Dawn River and I have been complications to polite society for 30 years, he replied, with a glance of affection toward his wife. "2 more won't make much difference." His expression grew more serious. "Besides, any friend of Swift Arrow's deserves consideration. Man saved my scalp twice over the years." Dawn River finally spoke, her English accented but precise. "We have a small cabin behind the trading post, used for special guests. You stay there." She examined Emily with particular interest, noting the medicine pouch from White Sage. "You heal?" Emily nodded. "I'm learning. White Sage taught me many remedies." Something like approval flickered across Dawn River's face. "Good. Many sicknesses in winter need helping hands." With practical matters settled, Blackwood invited them into the main building for a proper meal, the first they'd had at a table since leaving Philadelphia. The trading post's interior revealed Blackwood's unique position in frontier society. Traditional native crafts shared space with manufactured goods from eastern cities. Books lined one wall, evidence of intellectual interests rarely found at remote trading establishments. Comfortable furniture reflected both Western and indigenous influences, creating a space that somehow bridged the divided worlds. As they shared a hearty stew prepared by Dawn River, Blackwood regaled them with the story of his own unusual journey. From Philadelphia merchant's son to mountain man, from solitary trapper to husband of a Crow chief's daughter, from wanderer to established trader respected by multiple tribes and tolerated by military authorities who valued his intelligence about regional conditions. "Most folks pick a world and stick to it," he observed, refilling Swift Arrow's coffee cup with the casual familiarity of long acquaintance. "White or Indian, settler or native, civilization or wilderness. Never understood that thinking myself. Good and bad in all ways of living." His philosophy clearly explained the unique atmosphere of his trading post, a genuine middle ground where various cultures could meet without one necessarily dominating others. For the Parker sisters, it represented an unexpected third option. beyond returning to white society or remaining permanently with a native tribe. As evening approached, Swift Arrow announced that he would depart at dawn the following day. "Must rejoin the tribe before they leave summer grounds," he explained. "Long journey north before snow comes." Charlotte felt a surprising pang at this confirmation of his imminent departure. Over the months since their rescue, Swift Arrow had transformed from mysterious savior to valued teacher, to something more complex, a bridge between worlds, a constant in their uncertain existence, a friend whose judgment and character she had come to trust implicitly. "Will we see you again?" she asked, as they stepped outside to check on the horses, the question slipping out before propriety could restrain it. Swift Arrow gazed toward the mountains, now gilded with sunset light. "Spring brings many changes," he said, characteristically indirect. "Kiowa trading parties sometimes visit Blackwoods when streams run full with snowmelt." It wasn't a promise, but it offered a possibility. One Charlotte found herself hoping would materialize. Swift Arrow turned to face her directly, his expression more open than usual. "You have a strong heart," he said simply. "Found a path when others would surrender. Learned new ways when old ways failed." A rare smile softened his features. "Parker sisters not forgotten by Kiowa while winter moon crosses sky." The words carried meaning beyond their surface, an acknowledgement of connection that transcended their different origins and the coming separation. As twilight deepened over Blackwood's trading post, Charlotte realized they had indeed found their third path, neither returning to a society that had betrayed them, nor remaining where their presence endangered others, but establishing themselves in this unique middle ground until circumstances revealed their next direction. Emily joined them, her expression serene despite the day's fatigue. "Dawn River has shown me our cabin," she reported. "It's small but sound, with a proper fireplace and furnishings." She glanced between Charlotte and Swift Arrow, sensing the undercurrents of their conversation. "We'll be comfortable here while winter passes." As darkness claimed the valley and the first stars appeared above the mountain ridges, the Parker sisters stood with Swift Arrow outside Blackwood's trading post, their extraordinary journey having brought them to yet another unexpected juncture. Whatever challenges winter might bring, they faced them now not as helpless victims, but as women transformed by survival, carrying knowledge from two worlds and the strength forged by bridging the divide between them. Winter descended upon the Bighorn Valley with fierce intensity. By mid-November, snow blanketed the trading post grounds, transforming Blackwood's settlement into an isolated haven cut off from the wider world. Within days of Swift Arrow's departure, mountain passes had become impassable, sealing the Parker sisters into their new sanctuary until spring thaws. The small cabin behind the main trading post had become their home. Charlotte had added Kiowa touches to the interior. Woven mats on the plank floors, carefully arranged medicine bundles Emily had prepared with White Sage's teachings, a buffalo hide painting depicting their smoke signal rescue, the dancing fawn, had given them as a parting gift. These elements transformed the simple structure from mere shelter into a space that honored their extraordinary journey. Life at the trading post quickly fell into sustainable rhythms. Emily spent much of her time with Dawn River, whose knowledge of medicinal plants complemented what she had learned from White Sage. Together, they processed healing herbs gathered before the snows, preparing remedies for the ailments that inevitably accompanied winter's confinement. Charlotte divided her days between practical tasks and unexpected intellectual pursuits. Joseph Blackwood's surprising library provided reading material she had thought forever left behind in Philadelphia. Philosophy, history, natural sciences, even poetry and novels brought west at great expense. In exchange for access to these treasures, Charlotte organized the traders' chaotic business records and correspondence, applying her educated background to bringing order to years of haphazard documentation. Never seen my ledgers looking so respectable, Blackwood commented one evening in late December as Charlotte completed a careful inventory of his trading stock. Dawn River says your sister has similar gifts with her medicines. Everything labeled and arranged, so even a blind man could find what he needs. Charlotte smiled at the comparison. We were raised to value order and precision, she replied. I'm thinking of their father's methodical academic habits, though I never imagined applying those principles in such circumstances. Life has strange currents, Blackwood observed philosophically, stoking the substantial fireplace that heated the trading post's main room. Carries people to unexpected shores. He studied Charlotte with the directness that characterized his interactions. You and your sister have adapted better than most who find themselves between worlds. We had excellent teachers, Charlotte acknowledged, thinking of Swift Arrow, White Sage, and the other Kiowa who had shared their knowledge so generously. And motivation beyond mere survival, Blackwood nodded understanding. Revenge can be powerful fuel for endurance. Not revenge, Charlotte corrected thoughtfully. Justice, perhaps. But more than that, a desire to honor those who helped us by making something meaningful from what they gave. The trader seemed pleased by this response. Over the weeks, Charlotte had come to appreciate Blackwood's complex character. Beneath his gruff, frontier manner lay an educated mind, a nuanced understanding of the colliding cultures that defined the American West. His 30-year marriage to Dawn River represented not just a personal choice, but a philosophical position on the possibility of bridging seemingly incompatible worlds. As December yielded to January, occasional visitors breached the winter isolation, trappers seeking shelter from brutal storms, a small party of crow hunters trading fresh meat for coffee and ammunition, once even a lost army scout who departed quickly after securing directions. Clearly uncomfortable with the trading post's multicultural character, these visitors brought fragments of news from the outside world. Most significantly, a trapper arriving in early February reported that military patrols had ceased actively, searching for captive white women, the bitter winter weather having forced a suspension of operations until spring. Officer at Fort Laramie told me the whole thing's likely a fabrication, the weathered mountain man related over dinner. Said the wagon train leader who reported it, Mitchell, I think, had a reputation for exaggeration. No evidence of any attack found, and no tribes in the area reported conflict. Charlotte and Emily exchanged significant glances at this information. It seemed Warren Mitchell's lie had begun to unravel under scrutiny, though whether this resulted from inconsistencies in his account or simply the military's unwillingness to commit resources to an extended search remained unclear. Did you hear anything about what became of Mitchell himself? Charlotte asked carefully, keeping her tone conversational. The trapper shook his head. Continued on to Oregon Territory last anyone knew. Though there was talk of some legal troubles catching up to him, something about land claim irregularities back east. He chuckled darkly. Frontiers full of men running from their past, reinventing themselves with each new territory. This nugget of information provided Charlotte with unexpected satisfaction. Perhaps Mitchell would face consequences for his actions after all, though not necessarily for his betrayal of the Parker sisters. February brought the winter's deepest cold, days when breath crystallized instantly, and even brief exposure risked frostbite. During this time of enforced indoor confinement, Emily began documenting her medicinal knowledge in a journal Blackwood had provided, combining White Sage's Kiowa treatments with Dawn River's crow remedies and what she recalled of their father's medical books. This could be valuable beyond our personal use, Charlotte observed one evening as she reviewed her sister's careful illustrations and notes. Few physicians have access to traditional native healing practices. Emily looked up from her writing, her expression thoughtful. That crossed my mind as well. Father always said indigenous knowledge represented centuries of practical observation and experimentation. She traced a finger along a detailed drawing of a plant used for treating infection. Combining these traditions with modern medical understanding could save many lives. Charlotte recognized something significant in her sister's tone, a growing sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Emily had discovered not just an aptitude, but a passion for healing arts that transcended cultural boundaries. "You're considering a future in medicine," Charlotte said, making it a statement rather than a question. Emily nodded slowly. "If circumstances allow." "Dawn River says there's a doctor at Fort Laramie who sometimes trades for native remedies. She thinks he might be willing to provide formal instruction in exchange for the knowledge I've gathered." The prospect represented a remarkable transformation from the artistic dreamer who had joined the wagon train west. Trauma and survival had forged Emily into someone with clearer purpose and unexpected strength. Still artistic, but with her talents now directed toward healing rather than merely documenting the world around her. March arrived with the first tentative signs of approaching spring. Slightly longer daylight hours, occasional thaws that exposed patches of muddy ground before the next snowfall reclaimed them. Charlotte found herself increasingly drawn to the ridge overlooking the valley's southern approach, watching for travelers who might bring news from the wider world. Dawn River joined her during one such vigil, the older woman's quiet presence, comforting as they gazed across the snow-covered landscape together. "You watch for Kiowa," the trader's wife observed with gentle directness, "for Swift Arrow." Charlotte didn't deny it. Over the winter months, she had come to acknowledge, at least to herself, that her interest in Swift Arrow had deepened beyond gratitude or admiration into something more personal. Whether such feelings could or should be acted upon remained an open question, but she had stopped pretending they didn't exist. "The Kiowa winter camp was far north," she said, neither confirming nor contradicting Dawn River's observation. "I wonder how they fared during such a harsh season." "Swift Arrow is a strong leader, skilled hunter," Dawn River replied, with the pragmatism of someone who had witnessed many frontier winters. "Kiowa people survive hardship for many generations. They endure." Charlotte appreciated the older woman's matter-of-fact reassurance. During their months at the trading post, Dawn River had evolved from a reserved observer to something approaching a mentor, offering cultural insights, practical wisdom, and occasionally uncomfortable truths with equal directness. "When spring truly arrives, Joseph and I travel to rendezvous at Fort Laramie," Dawn River continued. "Trading parties from many tribes gather there. Information flows like spring rivers." She gave Charlotte a significant look. "Questions find answers at rendezvous." The implication was clear. The upcoming traders' gathering would provide opportunities to learn about the Kiowa band's welfare and perhaps receive news about Swift Arrow specifically. It would also likely bring more information about Warren Mitchell's activities and any continuing official interest in the missing Parker sisters. As March yielded to April, the valley underwent dramatic transformation. What began as isolated patches of exposed ground expanded daily as the strengthening sun reclaimed territory from winter's grip. Streams swelled with snowmelt, their joyful gurgling providing constant background music to the trading post's reawakening activities. Blackwood spent days preparing for the upcoming trading season, sorting winter-processed furs, repairing equipment neglected during cold months, and taking inventory of supplies needed from eastern sources. Charlotte assisted with documentation and correspondence, carefully recording transactions and coordinating orders that would journey east with the season's first freight wagons. Emily divided her time between completing her medicinal manuscript and helping Dawn River with the practical tasks of spring, planting the small kitchen garden that would supplement their provisions, assessing which stored foods had survived winter storage and which had not, preparing remedies for the inevitable ailments that accompanied seasonal transitions. By late April, the main valley trails had cleared enough for the first traders to arrive, a party of 3 French-Canadian trappers bringing winter-caught beaver pelts to exchange for ammunition and tobacco. They carried newspapers from St. Louis, months old, but still providing a welcome connection to the wider world. While examining these papers, Charlotte found something that sent ice through her veins despite the warming spring air. A small notice, reporting that Warren Mitchell had been appointed to a territorial commission overseeing land grants in Oregon Territory. The man who had betrayed them and left them to die had not only escaped consequences, but actually advanced his position and influence. "This changes our calculations," she told Emily that evening, showing her the newspaper. "If we come forward publicly now, we'll be challenging a government official rather than merely a wagon train leader." Emily considered this soberly. And with his new position, he has even greater motivation to ensure we're never heard from. The sisters discussed their options late into the night, weighing risks against principles, safety against justice. By morning, they had reached a decision that balanced prudence with integrity. They would document their full story in sworn affidavits witnessed by Blackwood in his capacity as a licensed trader, then entrust these documents to reliable authorities at Fort Laramie for safekeeping. This would establish their account without immediately bringing them into direct conflict with Mitchell. A wise compromise, Blackwood approved when they presented the plan. Forces of justice sometimes work slowly, but having your testimony properly recorded ensures Mitchell can't escape accountability forever. The first week of May brought final preparations for the journey to the Fort Laramie rendezvous. Blackwood's trading wagon was loaded with winter-accumulated goods, the most valuable furs protected in oiled canvas, trade goods carefully inventoried and secured. For the Parker sisters, the approaching departure stirred complex emotions. Their months at the trading post had provided not just shelter but healing, physical, emotional, and spiritual. They had arrived as refugees from violence and betrayal. They would depart as women transformed by extraordinary experience, carrying knowledge from multiple worlds and clearer purpose for their futures. 2 days before their planned departure, Charlotte's habitual ridgetop vigil was rewarded. A small party of riders appeared on the southern approach, 5 mounted figures moving with the distinctive horsemanship of plains tribes rather than white settlers or military personnel. Her heart quickened as she hurried back to the trading post. "Riders approaching from the south," she reported to Blackwood, trying to keep her voice casual despite her inner excitement. "Native, not military or settlers." The trader stepped onto his porch, shielding his eyes against the spring sunlight. After studying the approaching party for several moments, a slow smile spread beneath his graying beard. "Kiowa," he confirmed. "Lead rider looks to be Swift Arrow himself." Charlotte felt a rush of emotions too complex to analyze. Relief at confirmation of his survival through the harsh winter, anticipation of reunion, anxiety about what news he might bring of the tribe that had saved them, and deeper feelings she had acknowledged but not resolved during the long winter months. As the riding party drew closer, Charlotte could confirm Blackwood's identification. Swift Arrow led the small group, his straight posture and distinctive profile immediately recognizable even at distance. Behind him rode Strongwater and young Hawk, who had helped rescue the sisters, along with 2 younger men Charlotte didn't recognize. Blackwood raised a hand in greeting as the riders entered the trading post yard. Swift Arrow returned the gesture, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. As his gaze swept the assembled welcome party, Blackwood, Dawn River, Emily, and Charlotte. For a moment, as he dismounted with fluid grace, Charlotte feared months of separation had returned them to the formal distance of their earliest interactions. Then his eyes met hers directly, and something in his carefully maintained reserve softened. "Charlotte Parker," he said, the rare use of her full name carrying significance beyond the simple words. "Emily Parker. Good to find you well." "Swift Arrow," Charlotte replied, surprised by the steadiness of her voice despite her inner turmoil. "We've wondered about the tribe's welfare throughout the winter. Was it very difficult?" "Hard winter," he acknowledged, but Kiowa endured. New hunting. Grounds proved good despite the deep snow. His gaze held hers a moment longer than necessary. Many asked about the Parker sisters when spring councils met. As the travelers were welcomed into the trading post for refreshment after their journey, Swift Arrow explained the purpose of their visit. They had come to trade winter-processed buffalo robes and to gather information about military movements before the larger seasonal migration of the tribe. "Chief Grey Horse remembers war patterns from the past," Swift Arrow explained as they shared a meal inside. "Spring brings soldiers back to plains, wishes to avoid unnecessary conflict." "Wise thinking," Blackwood agreed. "Word from Fort Laramie suggests increased patrols this season." New commander eager to make a name for himself, the conversation turned to practical matters. Safe travel routes, areas to avoid, information about other tribes' movements that might affect Kiowa plans. Throughout these discussions, Charlotte noticed Swift Arrow occasionally glancing her way, as if gauging her reactions, or perhaps simply reassuring himself of her presence. As evening approached, Emily tactfully engaged the other Kiowa warriors in conversation about medicinal practices in their winter camp, allowing Charlotte and Swift Arrow a moment of relative privacy on the trading post's porch. "We prepare for journey to Fort Laramie," Charlotte told him, watching the sunset paint. "The valley in golden light. Emily has hopes of studying with a doctor there, combining what she learned from White Sage with formal medical training." Swift Arrow nodded approval. "Good path. Bridges worlds with healing knowledge. And I've been considering possibilities as well," Charlotte continued, gathering courage to share thoughts that had developed during the winter months. "Blackwood has connections with a newspaper in St. Louis. They need correspondents who understand frontier realities beyond common stereotypes." "You would write truth of both worlds," Swift Arrow observed, understanding the significance immediately. "Important work, when many spread lies for their own gain." The simple validation of her emerging plan meant more coming from him than it might have from anyone else. Swift Arrow had witnessed her at her most vulnerable and her most determined. His assessment carried the weight of that shared experience. "What path opens for Kiowa people?" she asked, turning the conversation to his future. "Will the tribe continue moving northward?" Something shifted in Swift Arrow's expression, a momentary glimpse of the weight he carried as a leader responsible for his people's welfare in increasingly constrained circumstances. "For now, yes," he replied. "But each season, safe territories grow smaller, more forts built, more settlers arrive, more treaties broken." He gazed toward the distant mountains. "Some young men speak of warpath, elders counsel patience, difficult balance." Charlotte heard the burden in his words, the impossible position of trying to guide his people through forces largely beyond their control. Whether through violence or accommodation, the traditional Kiowa way of life faced existential threats from the unstoppable tide of westward expansion. "I wish I had words of comfort," she said softly. "Something beyond empty assurances." Swift Arrow's expression softened again. "Truth between friends needs no cushion of false words." After a moment he added, "Seeing Parker sisters strong and purposeful brings its own comfort. Proves good can come even from dangerous times." As twilight deepened over Blackwood's trading post, Charlotte realized they had indeed come full circle. From the desperate smoke signal that had first connected their lives to this moment of quiet, Conversation as equals, each carrying hard-won wisdom from their shared journey. The future remained uncertain for both, filled with challenges neither could fully anticipate, yet somehow less daunting for having witnessed each other's courage in facing the unknown. The following morning brought practical planning for the different journeys about to commence. The Parker sisters and Blackwoods to Fort Laramie, Swift Arrow's party back to the Kiowa summer gathering place. Maps were consulted, routes discussed, potential hazards identified with the methodical attention of experienced plainsmen and women who understood the consequences of poor preparation. As the day drew to a close, Swift Arrow sought Charlotte out once more, finding her at her familiar ridgetop vantage point, watching the sunset paint the western sky in spectacular hues. "We leave at dawn," he said, joining her at a respectful distance. "Return to tribe with information gathered here." Charlotte nodded, accepting the reality of their diverging paths, while noting that he hadn't said a final farewell. Fort Laramie. "Trading season lasts until late summer," she observed carefully. "Many tribes gather there." Swift Arrow turned to face her directly, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. "Kiowa will send trading party. I will lead it." The simple statement carried weight beyond its practical meaning. Perhaps trails cross again when summer stands high. "I would welcome that," Charlotte replied with equal directness. They stood in companionable silence as the final light faded from the sky, stars emerging in the darkening vault above. So much remained unspoken between them, possibilities neither could fully articulate given the vast cultural divides and practical realities that separated their worlds. Yet in that moment of shared quietude, something significant passed between them. An acknowledgement that whatever the future held, the connection forged through their extraordinary journey had permanently altered both their lives. Dawn broke clear and cold over Blackwood's trading post. Two parties prepared for departure in the growing light, Swift Arrow's Kiowa riders heading south to rejoin their tribe, the trading post wagon bound for Fort Laramie to the southeast. As final preparations were made, Charlotte found herself standing beside Emily, watching Swift Arrow secure provisions to his horse with practiced efficiency. "Whatever happens at Fort Laramie," Emily said softly, "we've come further than anyone could have expected when we were left beneath that cottonwood tree." Charlotte nodded, thinking of all they had endured and learned since that desperate day. Skills acquired, perspectives transformed, strength discovered within themselves they hadn't known existed. The smoke signal that seemed our last hope brought more than just immediate rescue, she observed. It connected us to an entirely different understanding of this country and our place within it. As the two parties finally separated at the valley's edge, taking different trails toward distinct futures, Charlotte turned in her saddle for one final look at the rider who had altered the course of their lives. Swift Arrow raised his hand in farewell, silhouetted against the morning sky. Not a permanent goodbye, but an acknowledgement that while their paths might diverge, the connection between them remained unbroken. The Parker sisters rode toward Fort Laramie with clear purpose, not as victims seeking justice alone, but as witnesses to a more complex truth than either their former society or their Kiowa rescuers could fully comprehend. They carried with them the rare perspective of those who had truly crossed between worlds, finding humanity and cruelty, wisdom and folly on both sides of a divide few had meaningfully bridged. Whatever challenges awaited, whether confronting Warren Mitchell's deceptions, establishing new lives in a changing frontier, or navigating the complex cultural currents of a nation still defining itself, they faced them not as the vulnerable women who had been cast aside, but as survivors whose extraordinary journey had revealed strength they would carry forward into all the unwritten chapters yet to come. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them. Out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.